Hello, Thought Roomies, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hallie Rose. This week on the show, I have my friend Mellisa Reeves, and the story that she tells is inspiring, harrowing, heartbreaking. It will have you on the edge of your seat. It may have you in tears like it had me while we were recording it. And it will absolutely touch you. I know that, and I believe that. It is definitely one of the most powerful stories that's been told on the show. I was in awe of Mellissa's incredible strength as she shared her story in the second half of this podcast and shared about a horrifying moment of grace that changed the trajectory of her life. So make sure you listen all the way through the end so that you can hear this powerful, life-changing story. The first half of our podcast, we connect to conversations about social media, technology. How is technology influencing our lives? Are we addicted to our phones? And if time is money, what is happening with all the time that we spend on our phones? What would it look like if we redirected that energy into something different? And Mellisa shares her story about turning her smartphone into a dumb phone and the impact that that has had on her productivity, her memory, and her life. We share some secrets that are not so secret, but some wisdom about prosperity and abundance that has worked for both myself and Mellisa in generating income and overcoming scarcity. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. It is one of my favorites in a while. And I hope that if this resonates with you, you let us know. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Thought Room on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube. We've started to put full-length videos up on YouTube now. Make sure that if you are a Spotify listener, you now use the new Spotify rating, 5-star rating that has become available. It used to be just Apple Podcasts that you could rate on, and now Spotify has a new feature. So if you are a Spotify listener and you've just been waiting to give this show your raving review, you can finally now do that on Spotify. And of course, on Apple, as always, it will take you just a couple of seconds, and your time is so valuable to me. And your energy, your action of liking this show, sharing this show, reviewing this show is the energy of collaboration. It says to the universe, I value this thing. This is important to me. This is bringing goodness into my life. You vote with your time and you vote with your dollars. And so please take a moment to invest in the things that you care about. And if this show is one of those, I ask you to pay it forward by sharing the show with someone or by just leaving us a quick rating or review on the place that you listen. Thank you so much. And without further ado, let's step into the Thought Room with Mellisa Reeves. Mellisa Reeves, welcome to the Thought Room.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me in your home. This is wonderful. This is such a vibey space.
It's pretty vibey.
Many people are listening to this on Apple or Spotify, but some people will be watching this on YouTube, so they'll get to see this vibey little space that we're in. Can you describe what this room is like and what this room in your home is used for?
Yeah. Well, this is the master bedroom of the house. We used to have our bed in here. It's kind of the biggest room in the house. It's one of those kind of, suburban, like big master bedroom situations. It has really good light, probably the best light in the house. And after we had our bedroom in here for a couple of months, we both felt like our kids were too far away on the opposite end of the house. And I was like, I don't want to sleep in this room. I want to use this room for all the things. So we moved our bed into a totally transitional space that's not even a bedroom on the other end of the house. And this room is essentially, I call it the circle room. And I host women's circles in here. This is where I meditate and do my own work. This is where I work with clients. This is where I circle up with my family. This is where my husband and I, be in ceremony together. This is where we have sex. This is
Wow.
this is the room.
You have sex in here?
Yeah, we do.
This is like the Tantra.
This is the room. Yeah.
Sexual ritual room.
It is.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of set up in a circle with lots of.
I mean, do you have sex right here?
Yeah, right here.
Like right on this very cushion.
I don't know if that exact cushion, but
I hope so. I hope every corner of this room has been.
Most corners of this room have been blessed.
So blessed. Hashtag blessed. Great. So that gives us a really good understanding of what this room is for. And just the visual is it's filled. It's pops of green plants. Mm-hmm. You've got Himalayan salt lamps. You've got so many musical instruments. I see a ukulele, a guitar. What kind of skin is that on that drum?
That's a deer skin. I made that drum.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's very special.
I want
Maybe
that
I'll tell you
in
the
a
story.
second. Yeah. Deerskin drum that Mellisa made, some singing bowls here, crystal singing bowls. You've got a shruti box. Am I missing anything?
There's plenty of other instruments around the house, but I think that's it in here.
Wow.
Yeah.
So quite a musical collection. Great. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, it's fun having you here.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think about where we met. I was telling you, usually I start these podcasts off by giving some context of where we met, and I don't remember. Do you remember where
we met? At Callum Payton's for Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Awesome. And then we got to connect a little more deeply at a holiday party that you were hosting this year, and you invited me and Judd, and we just dropped into some conversation, and I was so blown away by your depth and certain parts of your story that just were naturally unfurling. I mean, the story you were sharing with me really shook me. And we were just casually standing in the kitchen at a holiday party. And I was like, I need you to come tell your story. But the initial thing that really sparked my interest was we got into talking about technology. And I'd love to start there.
Sure.
With your journey with social media. Actually, before we jump into that, let's give a little context for who you are.
Great.
How you be, how you like to be, and what kinds of things are involved in your beingness expression in your life.
Okay. Well, I'm a mom. That's, one of the foundational pieces for sure.
Of how many?
I have 2 children that are with me, and we'll get more into that story later. I've got a 12-year-old and an almost 5-year-old. So yeah, they keep me pretty busy. I spent many years in real estate until a handful of years ago, at which point I chose to leave and embark on the journey of supporting women in various ways. So really what I do now is, there's so many different ways it could be described. So I really just call myself a facilitator because I facilitate all different kinds of things. I'm a doula. So I help facilitate that space. I work a lot with women who are pregnant or want to be pregnant. I also just, I do trauma release work and healing work with women. I host circles and retreats and workshops, and I'm an herbalist. So, I bring a lot of that into my work as well. What else? I really love crypto.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of a newer thing, but I've always been an investor. So kind of has just evolved naturally.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You've got so many gifts.
And I'm a musician. That's the other thing you already alluded to. Both my partner and I have always been musicians. And
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So going back to the technology piece, you and I were sitting on the couch at your holiday party and we got talking about social media. And I think I was expressing my ongoing love-hate relationship with social media, the love part being loving to be engaged with community, the hate, I hate to call it hate, but the challenge being, do I really want to pour my energy into this space?
Yeah.
Am I bought into an illusion that this is the only way to create community nowadays? Is this the only way to be visible in my business? And I've proven to myself, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's taken a lot of trusting in the universe and prayer and send the right people to me because I never really felt authentic or right advertising that way. And I know a lot of people in our space, coaches, healers, authors, everybody is like, how much do I need to use this? And you have an incredible story about your scaffolded journey to where you are now, which is more on the extreme side of the spectrum, I would say.
Probably, yeah.
So will you walk us?
You'll learn that that's true about me in lots of ways.
Are you an extreme person?
I don't know if I'm extreme, but I'm all in. I just like, I grew up outside of the mainstream culture. And so
what does that mean to you?
I mean, I grew up on a farm in northern Canada. I'm the oldest of 10 kids and I was homeschooled. So that says it all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I struggled to fit in, to be totally honest. And so, yeah, there's lots of things about me that are just kind of outside of the box, I guess.
Yeah.
For better, for worse.
I think for better.
Okay,
I'm so glad you're here.
We'll see.
All right. Let's hear your renegade story about your technology journey.
So I totally resonate with everything you're saying. Just the love, hate, the feeling of like, is this an illusion? In the early days of my social media use for business, it was really to promote my podcast. I used to host a podcast about birth and motherhood called Mother Birth. It's very subtle. But in those days, it felt actually pretty good to use it because it felt like I was providing value. There was like really clear value. People were really engaged. The community grew quickly. I never felt inauthentic sharing about those conversations that I was having with people. It felt natural to do so. When I stopped hosting the podcast and transitioned to it being more of a, my business being more of an extension of me personally, doing the work that I do now with women and trying to talk about that work specifically on Instagram is really all I'm talking about because that's the only social media I've really ever used other than Facebook back in the day. It just it always felt off. And I always, I did get clients from it and that served to reinforce that belief that I need to be here because this is how I'm getting my business. This is how I'm getting my clients. How else will I create visibility? For several years, we traveled. And so I didn't necessarily have a local community of people that, that created very much visibility for me. So I really felt like I needed that, that social advantage, I guess. And it just always felt off. So I experimented with taking breaks from it several different times, trying to come back with a different approach, trying to be, either, at some points it was like, I'm going to be more disciplined. And at other times I'm going to be more aligned. And at other, it's like the rhetoric would change, but it was really all just the same thing, And I found that each time I came back, I would just get sucked into the same habitual ways and not even necessarily with my content, because I would shift my content approach, but what wouldn't shift at all was what the energy I received from the space. I would instantly get sucked back into comparison and, looking at what everybody's doing and thinking that I should be adjusting what I do because that's working for them, or how come I've never thought of that? And then, the thoughts that follow that are, well, I'm never going to be, I'm never going to be enough. These people have already figured this out and it's too late. And there's, they've got this, this market cornered and I'm 5 years too late, and that was the only feeling it produced
What
in
a
me.
bad feeling inside your body.
Terrible, terrible feeling.
And then you're doing it every day.
Yeah.
And those neural pathways are firing.
Yeah.
And those same chemicals are being released of not enoughness.
Yeah.
And it creates this habitual behavioral rut that you're stuck in. Okay. So then what? You decide enough is enough.
So I did decide enough is enough. And it actually I had already been on a longer hiatus from Instagram specifically.
So you took it off your phone?
I took it off my phone.
For how long?
At this point, probably 6 months.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
What did you notice at first during this time?
At first I noticed a lot of withdrawal. I would reach for it and be like, whoa.
Like your brain knew where on your home screen it was. And then you'd be like, oh shit, it's not there anymore. Oh, that's weird and embarrassing.
Totally. Yeah. So in time that faded. But here's where I felt like I was giving myself like a hall pass and I didn't even know it. So I was kind of patting myself on the back, like, look at me, not look at me, but like, I'm not on Instagram, I'm being so, whatever the word would be, like, I'm being so conscious of my use of this. Right. But what I didn't realize was that I was just diverting that energy and attention to other things, specifically on my phone.
Huh.
And so even things that, not other social media platforms, but even just like I was checking my email compulsively. There's nothing a fucking interest in my email. Not really.
Right.
From time to time there is, but for the most part, it's like, oh, I should get back to that person. I probably won't right now. Maybe I'll check later and see.
Mark is unread. Just reading. That's what I do.
Totally. And I do have a little bit of leftover, like, my real estate career, I was just a productivity, like so obsessed.
Fiend.
Yeah. And, inbox zero was like
really,
I lived by that motto. So, anytime my inbox isn't at zero, I'm like, oh, I might feel like I might barf.
Okay. Mine would make you want to implode.
Yeah. I do sometimes see that number on other people's phones and I'm like in my mouth a little bit. It doesn't feel good. So, but I was noticing that not only was I compulsively doing things like checking my email several times throughout the day, but then not actually doing anything about the things that maybe did even need to be done. So more and more things were piling up in my life that were not being taken care of, including financial things, like, and nothing like blow up your life, but things that were adding up to make a difference.
Yeah. So the feeling of that is what? Like, describe the somatic experience of things piling up in your life.
Yeah. The feeling would be like, okay, so like I would say an agitation specifically in my belly.
Yeah.
Tightness or like constriction in my throat. And almost this, like, for me, I'll even get this feeling in my head that's like, like when you move your eyes too quickly and you get that feeling, it's like that's happening kind of in the back of my head.
Yeah, like a visual, like that visual flicking. That's just like a scanning. Yeah. It's almost like a survival. Yeah. The survival reptilian part of our brain feels threatened and anxious.
Yeah. And is like searching for the input that like, and that's what, when you look at the research, that's what our phones are actually programmed to do, is to like soothe that part of the brain. Yeah. Of course, it makes it worse, but it in the moment does soothe it. And so that's why we constantly reach for it. So I had a series of conversations, one that culminated with a conversation with a friend who told me that she had just turned the language that she used was just turned her phone into a dumb phone. And so I kind of like
dumb phone.
Yeah. And so I kind of picked her brain about it. And I was just like so there and so ready. And I like just literally went home and did it the next day. It was like, I was just so ready. And here's the thought process. And I think I already told you this, but I had this moment where I realized that I bet my capacity is 25% of what it used to be. Mm-hmm. Like if what was required of me 10 years ago when I, had a real estate career and all of those things, if what was required of me on just a regular Wednesday 10 years ago was required of me today, I would just buckle. I would not be able to handle it. Mm-hmm. And not that I want my life to look like it did 10 years ago. I've intentionally changed it so that it doesn't. But there is from time to time, situations where we do need to, like, we need the capacity to rise to the challenge to like take care of what needs to be taken care of. And I would like to be able to, if needed, Right. And I just had this like, it was just an epiphany that I my capacity is like gone. And what have I been doing, you know? So I went pretty cold turkey. Basically I removed everything from my phone that wasn't like Apple Maps or phone, FaceTime, or text. I have the Tesla app on my phone because I have a Tesla. So, I need to be able to use that. And I have Venmo and nothing else.
So you told me this before, but I just want to reflect this back. No web browser.
There's no web browser.
You told me that if somebody even texts you a link, you cannot open it.
I cannot open it.
There's zero social media.
I can't check my email.
You can take photos.
I can take photos.
No email at all.
Yep.
You can get calls and texts.
Calls and texts.
Period.
It doesn't do anything else. And it's interesting. I also turned it into black and white. That's another sort of thing that people do.
Okay, tell me that.
The idea is just that it is just not as pretty to look at. It's not as alluring. It doesn't.
So you get in, get out. You just get what you need.
You just get what you need and you get out. It actually almost like hurts to look at. You're like, oh, like, and I think a lot of people do that while still maintaining the functionality of their apps. And I think some people say that it helps them to use their apps less. Because if you're on Instagram and it's black and white, it's just probably not going to command your attention for as long.
Right.
But I just kind of went the whole way. And I will say, I will not ever go back. You
will not ever go back.
I mean, that might, this comes back to the extreme thing. Like maybe that's an extreme thing to say. And maybe I'm foolish to say that. I just don't see, there has been no downside.
Okay, great. There has been no downside to the choice that you made to turn your smartphone into a dumb phone.
Yeah.
So let's get into that a little more. You were describing to me some of the most profound benefits that you found of making this change. Will you get into those?
First and foremost, which is pretty obvious, is just the amount of time I've gotten back. And I think that I was, again, in the spirit of patting myself on the back for being off of social media, just did not realize how much time I was still spending on my phone. In fact, I think it was creeping up and up and up over time.
Right.
And of course, that the app exists on the phone that can tell you what your screen use is.
Which probably most of us don't look at because we're in denial and we don't actually want to know how alarmingly high it is.
Right. And those things I think are skewed because, it will measure if you're listening to Spotify and count that as time. And, that's a little different than scrolling on Instagram or, other habitual things that we might do. So you kind of have to dig down a little deeper to see what's really going on. But when I did that, I saw like, okay, this is not good. This is like, this is hours of my day.
Yeah.
Literally hours, So the time that I got back has been really, really valuable. It has allowed me in the last almost half of the year. It was not quite 6 months of last year, but several months to just really actually get several creative projects that have just felt like they were kind of floundering for some time, just fully push them through and just feel so much momentum and so much energy around them. The other thing is that I have had a significant improvement in my memory.
Yeah, you were telling me about this. This is really fascinating to me because there's already a ton of research about how our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And it doesn't take a very intelligent person to notice that Instagram has changed their clips over time from like 30-second story to 20-second story to 15. Now it's like 10 seconds.
Yeah. Did they change it again?
I think it's like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's just going down and down and down. You don't think that's affecting our brains?
Yeah.
It completely is. And our kids as well.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. I think I had read this research some time ago talking about how the fact that we can so easily attain, we can get information in the blink of an eye, and our brains know that now. And so they don't retain information in the same way because the brain knows that we'll just be able to get that information again. You can Google it in a second on your phone. So there's no reason to like hold on to it. And over time, like you said, the neural pathways just doesn't actually take very long for those neural pathways to form. And now, we don't remember basic things. And, I used to have the reminders app thing that I would, use Siri to remind me to do this later, remind me to do this later. And the fact that I could do that meant that my mind didn't have to hold on to that information.
It's like children not learning mental math.
Yeah.
Or like not understanding the concepts of behind the math that they're learning and just doing like rote memorization.
Totally.
And then it all gets wiped because it's not useful.
Or just going straight to using a calculator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. My son's always like, why can't I just use a calculator? And I'm like, because like you won't actually know any of this. You won't understand a single thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, the memory stuff. I remember you telling me a story about how you can go to bed now and your mind sounds a lot like mine, where perhaps some of the men in our lives just lie down and crash out and are like, good night. But
Totally.
I'm lying there being like, okay, I have to do that. I have to do that. I have to do that. Okay. And you were saying you can remember up to like how many things?
I mean, I have that I have recorded the following morning, remembered up to 5 things at bedtime that I'm like, I have to do these things tomorrow that I did not yet think of or record in any way. And in the morning, I remember them all. Is it possible that the night before I thought of 6 and I only remembered 5? I don't know, but I remembered 5.
But still, the fact that you're building this trust with yourself now, it's like, okay, these 5 things came up. Okay, I got to make so-and-so's lunch. I've got to take this to the school. I've got to run this to this person.
Yeah.
And there's the anxiety there in the lists, in the to-dos. And then you're like, no, I got this. Like,
which is very, very soothing to the nervous system.
I can rely on myself. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's been really huge. And as part of this process, I also went back to using like a paper planner.
Yeah.
And that has been actually really fun. Like it has felt, I feel like a teenager. I'm like, like
put your stickers in and make it colorful.
Totally. And I've been so disconnected from that for years. That's been really beneficial. It's gotten me, I've gotten more done. I can't even express how many things I've gotten done in the last few months. Some of these things are things that have lingered for years.
Wow.
Like, I'm not kidding. Like 8 years.
What does that feel like to get those? Like, give me an example of one. And what did that feel like to get off your plate?
Okay. So an example of one is I'd been planning to move my partner and I's IRAs into a different kind of structure where we could invest in alternative assets. And this had just been in the works for forever and just like 100% in my court, like just languishing. And it is like a big undertaking, there's a lot of steps to it, but I just like suddenly had the capacity to do it and just got the whole thing done. A lot of other financial things. It's been really interesting because, and you and I talked about this really kind of in a roundabout way, but one of the things for me in the journey of the last few years of this different path I've been on in terms of working with women, I've had a hard time. I've had a hard time like accepting exchange and like really believing in the value of what I'm doing. In comparison to what I used to do that just felt so intrinsically valuable and easy to accept payment for and, all of that. So that comparison almost made it harder. As a result of that, I felt like I was slowly leaking financial sovereignty, if that makes sense. And deflecting a lot of it to my partner in a way that I'd never done in our relationship before, because I'd always been very financially both like independent and successful. And so it was just really interesting to like realize that part of the capacity I was reclaiming, as silly as it sounds to relate it to this like technology thing, it's like it was giving me the space to like take some agency back in terms of like just my own financial independence and decision making, and just like start fucking getting shit together in my life again. And it to look at where I'm at right now compared to 4 months ago, it's kind of astonishing.
it sounds like this has been a powerful reclamation of your sovereignty and personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such a massive thing right now. We can look out to the world and see a pervasive need to blame the other,
Yeah.
like in this cultural sense. And our hurt, our trauma is like, you did this to me.
Yeah.
You are doing this. You're a bad person. Let's cancel you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that's not what's going on in your relationship, but there's like these subtle textures of, I'm overwhelmed. I'm at capacity. You need to step in
Yeah.
and do this. Some truth in that, but also, okay, well, am I taking responsibility for the overwhelm? Right?
Yeah. And for my part in this,
Exactly.
I recently did a course that one of the women that has been a teacher to me. Her name is Kimberly Johnson. She offers this course on money and the nervous system, and it was
Cool.
really profound for me to go through it and realize that there are a lot of ways I blame my partner for any financial struggle or lack of having it all together. I've really put that on him and taken this mantle of like, I'm good with money. And this process of recognizing the ways that I am not good with money was really, really challenging for me to get to that point. And here's the really cool thing is that in that acknowledgement and in the releasing him from like, this is your fault. Like any bad aspect of our financial journey has been on your shoulders. Releasing him from that has allowed us to finally move into financial conversations that are uncharged, actually productive, and we've moved the needle in ways that in 10 years, there was no movement.
Wow. That sounds like some incredibly deep shadow work on your part. Like, my mind's going, what happened in childhood?
Yeah.
Where Mellisa needed to keep herself safe, and anybody who wasn't keeping her safe, there was someone that didn't keep you safe or something like that.
Well, I definitely had lots of unsafety in my childhood for sure. And both financially and in plenty of other ways. I actually think specifically related to the financial piece, I grew up not in poverty, but we definitely didn't have a lot. And we also lived, like I mentioned earlier, just really outside of mainstream culture. So we also just didn't have a lot of the things that other people had. Even if we did have money for them, that's not what my parents would have, allocated resources to.
Yeah.
And my mom was actually really diligent about teaching us to save money to the point that I think a lot of us feel I always thought that was a really good thing until recently I realized it actually produced this scarcity mindset in me that, I need to hold on to and hoard what I have because I won't have enough in the future. And I definitely can't share it or, think or take very risky, steps in terms of investing because I can't lose what I have. I've worked so hard to save this.
Right.
And that has been really interesting unpacking.
Yeah, there's so much nuance in that, and I definitely agree with you. I'm always riding that edge of how much to save, how much to invest, how much to trust my own ability to just continually create income and to be creative in wild and wonderful ways. The jobs that we have are not typical. So it's not like we have a 9 to 5 and there's an hourly rate coming in. It's based off of creation. It's based off of alignment and listening and risk and listening to the soul and saying, okay, this is what wants to come forward. All right. I hope this is valuable. I hope people need this. I'm going to do my best to be in integrity to offer this thing. I'm going to be honest about how much this time and service is taking me. And there's just so many subtle energetics to it. But I love what you said about the savings because in the teachings of Abraham and Esther Hicks, they get into this a little bit. It's like, what is the energy around your savings account? Is the energy around your savings account bringing you that feeling of like, I'm putting like $50 a month or a week or whatever in, and it's like, oh, that brings me expansion in my heart, because I know I'm being diligent. There's a little bit going in and it's there, versus someone else's savings accounts, like there's not enough in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just had to dip into my savings.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for. It's your
Totally.
safety net,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yes, just watching like what are the thoughts surrounding our investments, our bank accounts, our spending even.
Well, and interestingly, like you just said, to compare those two reactions or feelings to looking at a savings account, the amount could be proportionately the same, you know, in both of those cases. And it's funny to think about. I mean, there have been times in my life where the same amount of money has felt really safe and enough and good and like, you know, nourishing to my life. And another point in time, that same amount of money just feels like fuck.
I feel like part of being financially prosperous is really getting comfortable with the risk and being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with someone, and we've been working together for over a year. And now I've brought her on as a member of my team. So she's really getting to see the behind the scenes and the numbers. And she's also working through her own prosperity, abundance, scarcity, balance as she steps into what her offering is going to be for the world. And it's been so fun in real time to share with her my journey. She gets to see the fluctuations in the bank accounts. And I let her know, 3-4 years ago, I was exactly where you are. I was living in the same city. I was hustling in the same way. And I was living off like not even $100 a week. I was trying to make it work. And it was just trust. And I don't mean to sound hippy dippy when I say that. It's just, you need to believe in yourself, because now you're watching the bank account like pour in, 4 to 5 figures this week or that week. And then it just dips way down low because you're paying all these team members. And I said, look, it's the same thing. Yeah. I'm still trusting. Yeah. It's all the same. It's just getting comfortable at different levels of risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that journey for most people is, and I think probably should be incremental, like you watch basketball stars make millions and whatever, however much money they make, and they're all bankrupt in 5 years because they went from nothing to that,
or
right?
People winning the lottery.
Yeah,
because they don't know how to manage it.
Totally. Yeah. So we're sort of given what we can handle. And that, I think, I think that way, like, and I believe this about everything, when I work with women and we're working on stuff around the nervous system, I'm like, we're not looking for some massive, massive thing to happen. We're looking for incremental, sustainable movement and change. We're looking for you to increase your capacity, increase your range, increase your ability to stay with yourself in whatever is happening, even when it's really, really fucking hard.
Okay, I'm so excited about this. And the question that's coming up is, there's people listening who want to increase their rate of prosperity of where they're at. And I feel like posing this question: what do I need to do in order to support my nervous system to receive more abundance and to expand my capacity? So what things do people need to pay attention if they're wanting to up their game and kind of modulate themselves to a higher level of prosperity? But like you said, we almost have to train for it.
Yeah.
What can people do practically?
Yeah.
Or do you have resources?
Well, I think that just what we were just talking about is so important. The increments, the like learning to be diligent with what you have. And that's why I think the example you gave of someone like putting $50 into savings, which might just seem like it would never make a dent. It's like even less about the dollar amount as it is the practice of doing something like that. For another person, that might be the worst thing for them to do. That might just be like a really safe, habitual thing that they actually need to stop doing that. Right. So I think it takes a lot of discernment and a lot of intuition to be like, okay, I think the most important thing to start with is really taking inventory and getting really fucking honest with yourself, because I think most of us have stories about money, and this isn't just about money. Any kind of like value or exchange in our lives that could be relational, it could be professional, and many of those things relate to money, but sometimes they don't. We're mostly not being honest with ourselves. And I feel like every stage of my life where I'm catapulted into a new layer of growth is when there's something that I finally am willing to look at in myself that I have been blind to, right? And in this thing that we're talking about, it was recognizing and being willing to acknowledge the ways that I have actually sabotaged myself financially instead of continually putting that on my partner. So that inventory, I think, is the essential starting point. And then somatically, I think that there is a lot of, there's a lot of value to, one of the things, I won't say too much about the course in case anybody were to take it. I don't want to, give away her process. My friend Kimberly Johnson, she has the course on money and the nervous system. We can put a link to that.
Yeah.
All of her work is really great. And she does a lot of work around the nervous system. But one of the things that she has people do is like actually just log in and look at their bank account and just be with what comes up, right?
Yeah.
So like look at your savings, like you said, look at your checking, look at your credit card. So this is actually what she says. She says, log into the account that holds the most charge for you, right? And so that probably is a bank account that is
your
either,
debt.
yeah, it's either like somewhere where money needs to come out of that there isn't money, or your debt. And so this is, this would be a principle of the nervous system that would apply to anything. And how it applies to this is like, okay, can you log in there and even momentarily bypass your habitual way of like, one thing I noticed that I used to do is my credit card's login is connected to a couple of my other accounts. So I would log in. I knew where on the screen that number would come up. So I knew as it logged in to avert my eyes to somewhere else on the screen, and then to instantly click somewhere else that would remove the view that had that credit card.
Wait, you were doing this consciously or unconsciously?
I mean, a mix of both,
Wow.
right? Obviously it's conscious enough that I'm choosing to do it, but I'm kind of like halfway unconscious as well.
That's a massive denial.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like the inventory takes much more honesty than most of us are actually ready or comfortable for.
I have had this experience too throughout the years because, my financial situation has completely overturned in the last couple of years. And, there were many years in the last 5 years that my income was close to nothing, like truly and deeply. And, things have really shifted. And I remember in that like awkward adolescent phase of like, it's like the puberty financial phase where I was like, oh, there's still a lot of debt, but there's some stuff coming in, but I don't know how to manage all this. Really encouraging myself to do what we're talking about here and pulling up all the bank accounts.
Yeah.
And being like, all right, well, I hate spreadsheets. Let me do a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And let me just like put things into little boxes. Let me see how much is going out. I was afraid. I was like, oh, this is going to be so much. But it wasn't, because once I could see what was going out, I was like, oh, that's not as bad as I thought. And okay, here's my insurance. Here's my phone bill. Here's like the things that are core. Then here's like my Spotify membership and my website stuff and just all my subscriptions. And I was like, yeah, those are serving me. This one I could probably let go. Or like, how much money did I spend on domain names last year? Just like looking at those things. And it doesn't have to be this big self-shaming. It's just like, oh, wow. Compared to those other numbers.
Yeah.
It was like, it was just
inventory.
So then here's the exciting part, which we don't ever think about the exciting part.
Right.
For me, I am so shocked at how much I've grown to love my little spreadsheet, because now what I can do is I can use it to vision. And so if I know how much I desire to receive abundantly from the universe, from my work, if I'm looking at the schedule of my year, okay, I want to take a month off here. I need this much. I start like in a different color plugging into my spreadsheet money I haven't made yet. And I actually project my income into the future. And then when I get a new client or something, I add it as like a solid color versus like pending. And looking at it brings me peace because I go, this is attainable.
Yeah.
This is attainable. Yeah.
And you're actually creating this visual representation of that creation process where something comes from nothing. So you have this number in there that someone could argue is imaginary or, an illusion, but you actually watch it turn from that into something that is real.
It does. And if I didn't put it there, it wouldn't, I don't think, unless we're willing to be bold enough to be like, that's what would feel good. That's what I need. Then what happens is the brain starts firing these different synapses going, okay, so we need $5,000 here. We need $10,000. We need $400, whatever it is. It goes, okay, how can we create space for that? In my meditations, I'm starting to do the Joe Dispenza meditations, the morning and evening meditations, which we'll link to here as well in the show notes because I'm preparing to go to Mexico and be live in person with him in a couple of weeks. I started meditating on like almost like in my vision space, like a Rolodex, but like numbers going up really, really, really fast.
Yeah.
And
just like a ticker.
It's like a ticker.
Yeah.
And it's like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, like millions, and just watching it go up and then tracking my breathing and my heart rate and my nervous system as that vision is opening.
Yeah.
And then another really powerful one for abundance. This is what really got me out of my rut when I was truly bankrupt. 5 minutes every day, I would meditate on prosperity and abundance. But what does that mean? Right? Like that's a concept. It's pretty lofty. So how do we ground that down into the body? I thought, okay, what would it look like for me to be expressing and embodying abundance in the world? For me, I wanted to have the feeling of sitting down to lunch with my deepest beloved friends and without them noticing, throwing down my credit card and paying for the meal or the dinner for everybody. And not because I wanted to look cool, but because these people had done so much for me. And when I didn't have money, I had nothing to give them back but my love. And I really wanted to treat them and show them. So I envisioned in my space me paying for lunches, me sending friends like really thoughtful gifts that I was able to purchase effortlessly. Me being able to like miss my family and then last minute book a flight and not have to worry about the cost of the flight and just having the freedom to fly anywhere in the world whenever I wanted. Visualizing those on a loop. Physically, I would be smiling by the end of the meditation and I would feel an openness in my body. That's how we take these lofty concepts and we ground them down into embodiment.
Yeah. So I call that core resonance. And I do a lot of work with my clients around transforming core dissonance to core resonance. And I believe that on the nervous system level, again, this is the range we're looking for, right? We're looking to increase the range of our capacity to hold the resonance and to be with it, even if it's like feels unfamiliar and out of reach, and also the dissonance. So like the dissonance would be pulling up that credit card statement that's just like feels like rocks in your stomach, right? Like you have diarrhea. It's so bad.
Yeah.
But
gosh.
And I think we've all been there in some way or the other, because I'm a firm believer that like to we don't just like transmit the frequency of the resonance. We have to be able to have the capacity for that whole range. And so with the dissonance, we're sitting with the ability to be present with what is, and then without even the actual, it's like you putting the numbers into the spreadsheet before you're there. You're not denying the reality that money's not there yet. You are actually sitting with both, right? You are fully present in the what is, which is that know that money has not yet arrived, and fully open to and receptive like to the resonance of it being there, right? So it takes that like capacity for the whole like system. And I think that clearing, this comes back to the inventory, but clearing the channel. I love that I was going to say this, but like going through your subscriptions, going through the things that like you owe or that are owed to you, money that's just being wasted. I think that we dismiss that as important because, especially if they're insignificant numbers. It's, of course, if there's like something that we're spending hundreds of dollars on a month, it would be easy to be like, oh, that's an important amount. But it's like the $8 and the $13 and the $29. We just like don't think that matters. And maybe for the amount of income that you make, it feels like it doesn't. But ultimately, like it's not about the dollar amount. It's about the energy of that output, right? It's about you giving resource to something that isn't actually like resourcing you back. And so if you are just leaking to all of these things that there's not a proper exchange there, or maybe there was once and now there isn't, then it just like, if it's a boat, there's just like little leaks everywhere,
Some of the most successful people that I've seen with money, and if you're not in a position of abundance, listening to this can be a little activating because you're like, of course they're relaxed about things that happen because they have the money to replace it. But this is, again, chicken and the egg scenario. When things break, when something gets sent to you and it's like faulty or when someone maybe doesn't provide the best service at a restaurant and you have to tip them or whatever. I've been with different types of people in these different situations and I've tracked what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that because I do the same thing.
Right. Well, there's some people that will be like, this thing came to me broken or it's the wrong one. And of course, like if you paid for something, like you should have it. But, can I hustle to get like extra or can I get something for free out of this? Because I'm going to be sticking it to the man and capitalism by taking advantage of this situation. How much can I get out of my insurance? How much can I squeeze out? That's a scarcity mindset. And then I've seen people who will just say, oh, it all equals out. It all equal. And like, that's their simple answer is, I just charge it to the game. I've heard people say it like, oh, charge it to the game of life. That's just a cost of, and it's worth more to them to mentally let go and provide themselves with the gift of freedom than it is to cling onto the scarcity.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key. The key is the letting go. So whether there's something that actually needs to be financially resolved in your life, like some agreement or something that actually needs resolution, or the layer beneath that is just actually surrendering it and letting it go. Either way, they're both the same thing. And it has to that has to happen for there to be like a clear channel,
Yes. I want to just quickly, because I know we could go on forever, but I want to quickly talk about crypto because I love that you're a woman and you're into crypto because I feel like it's right now, it just feels like it's such a male saturated space in my world.
Male saturated.
And I haven't really had the opportunity to talk much about crypto. We glossed over it a little bit in my episode with Adam Apollo, but ultimately we're just titrating into the topic of crypto with my audience as I do myself and play in this space. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about like what you know about cryptos and NFTs, and keep in mind that some of us, like I'm raising my hand, are really vanilla in this space. And I want to get into not only what they are, but why this is important. And what's coming in the world. And when we say the word decentralized, because it's thrown around, do people really know what this means?
What that means.
And are you intimidated to have these conversations with the super smart crypto people because you don't actually fully understand the mechanics yet?
Just like the very basic.
So let's get some more people through their scarcity of even having that conversation and open this up in a super approachable way.
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying I'm not a crypto expert.
Great. That'll probably serve us here.
Yeah, totally. I've been investing in crypto for just over a year. So just for context, I've done lots of different kinds of investments over the years. It's always been a big part of my life, including real estate investment. And I love to like understand financial markets. Definitely feel like there are certain aspects of it that are beyond my plebeian mind. But I also feel like there's a lot about it that I really get and that really makes sense to me. And I love that you brought up, like, I feel like I stayed out of the space for a long time because I felt really inadequate to understand it. And I think that the barrier of entry is pretty high in that sense. And the platforms that make it easy to invest in crypto are usually not where the like great opportunities are anyway. So like, yeah, for someone that feels like they want to get into it, but don't want to understand, don't want to like go deep down the rabbit hole, there's options to do that. But there's just not a ton of upside in that world, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, the value of it, I think, is really that when we think about the word you used, decentralized finance is essentially what this whole world is built on and what its entire value is. And I think that is what people are missing. They're missing the truth that what crypto offers is not just like all of these crazy new technologies that like are changing every day and impossible to even keep track of, but they offer the opportunity for the average person at any level of net worth to be involved in the gain of the financial industry. So the centralized financial system built on the banks, that it goes way back before JP Morgan or any of our modern institutions. You had to be royalty. You had to be of significant financial means. You had to be a Rothschild to be able to gain from the financial system, right? And so what these platforms and technologies allow through crypto, through NFTs, they allow, with a bit of technical ability, they allow the average person with any amount of money to gain in proportion to their investment, right? So like a person that has $1,000 to invest in crypto can gain and can even provide liquidity for loans and things that they receive the return on. So again, traditionally banks would be the only people that that work for banks at high levels would be the only ones that would be able to gain from like having a lot of capital that they make available to the public and receive a substantial return on. So I think that that's really the gain and the thing that I want people to understand. And I don't like officially do this, but I've helped a lot of people get started in crypto because I'm like, yes, this is important,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love driving around Austin and seeing the billboards that are up around here. I don't know where, if it's like this in other places, but I keep seeing billboards that say like crypto is real.
Yeah.
And things like that. I'm like, ooh, who's putting these up? I like this.
It's good.
I like the heart. I like the mission behind what's happening with crypto. For me, when I think about it, I think about a more empowered world, a more fair world. I know there's a lot of fear for some people entering into this space. I know there's some fear for people about the whisperings we're hearing of imminent financial collapse in the current system because of inflation. And I mean, that's undeniable. I think it's a matter of time. And that's not to freak people out. It's like, be prepared.
Yeah.
Have a little cash out, just like have some things ready in case the banks collapse. But it's going to start equalizing things. Like this is just humanity evolving. I think this is part of it.
Well, when you shift enough, when you reallocate to the extent that we have, I mean, the centralized banks are still hold a big piece of the pie, but things are shifting so rapidly in terms of where even very traditional quote unquote investors are allocating their clients' money has shifted so much that it will both contribute to the decline and collapse of that system and also be a hedge against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can you very briefly, just like in a few minutes, and then I want to switch gears to your other pieces
we have so
of
many,
story.
so many pieces.
Can you just give us a layman's term definition of your understanding of NFTs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm even newer to the NFT space because they really came into being during this, for the most part, in terms of the wider spread understanding and narrative in the last handful of months. And, I like to understand things before I get involved, and I am still in the process of understanding.
I think that's a good habit.
Yeah. Yeah. So even in just the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot more involved in NFTs. So an NFT stands for non-fungible token. And so something that's fungible is duplicatable or equal in value to something else. So like a $5 bill, two $5 bills right next to each other are of equal value. And the fact that they are of the same value both reinforces their value and also limits their value, right? So something that is non-fungible is something that can't be reproduced or can't be, it is unique, right? So in many ways, people think of the NFT space as it relates to art. It's certainly not only related to art in terms of like, a physical thing that you might look at. But if you think of a Picasso, there's like the original Picasso, and then yes, there might be duplicates made of that, but they don't carry that same value that original piece does. So an NFT is really a piece, something that is a collectible, that is unique in its value. It cannot be reproduced. Only one person at a time can own that particular thing. And they can be anything from a piece of actual, digital art, to, now we're seeing stuff coming up out around literature, books that are being made into NFTs. So potentially a person could own an entire book, or they could own a portion of a book or a quote from a book. There are, clips of basketball players, doing famous things that are NFTs. I mean, and a lot of it seems silly, right? A lot of it you look at and you're like, what is the fucking value of that? Like, who would pay for that? Especially when we see that some of these things are selling for like, like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, why is that worth that?
Right.
But someone could ask the same question about Picasso. It's like, what is that good about Picasso? So there's a whole other, go ahead.
So like owning the video. So like when you're saying owning a video of like a basketball player doing something, does that mean like digitally there's no other copy of it? What does that mean?
And this is a part that like another person that's more of an expert than me should really address, because theoretically, yes, there could be other clips. I mean, someone else could have been at that same basketball game and, maybe even have a better clip than this particular one that has sort of been formalized as this NFT. The idea is that even though there could be other versions of it, or even they don't have the signature, like the official.
It's like a digital stamp.
It's a digital stamp. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So a person, and that's transferable. People buy it and it changes ownership, and
Right. Okay. Cool.
Definitely have someone else that knows more about NFTs on the show to be even better at talking about it.
We will. And if there's, thank you for that intro to all of this. And if there's somebody listening that's like, I know the perfect person to guest on the show about this.
A lot of the NFTs that are emerging are around the gaming space.
Yeah.
So, and that to me feels like where I started getting on board, because that has a lot more utility and makes a lot more sense. That something that you're collecting is a character in a game, or you know what I mean? Like some way that interacting with some kind of interface creates value for this collectible, as opposed to just like, does it look good?
Right. Okay. So like that might be like a certain avatar or like a certain weapon in a certain game that's like one of a kind.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was part of this project just the last couple weeks, where the NFT that they produced are these like video clips of Robert De Niro. They filmed Robert De Niro and he's reacting in real time to the price of Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency token. So, there's like creative stuff happening that it's like, on one hand, you're like, what really is the value of that? But then it's also like kind of like culturally iconic, you know? So it's like there's
a lot of creativity coming out of this. And
totally.
I like that. I think creativity is going to cure the world.
Yeah. Hope so.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to take us on a little bit of a hard left turn here.
Yeah. Now we're going into territory I can really speak authoritatively about.
I think you spoke authoritatively on everything that we just spoke about, but taking us back to your holiday party.
Yeah.
And standing in the kitchen. I can't remember exactly how our conversation got started, but I think it was around your spiritual journey and your religious journey. And then you ended up sharing a super raw and personal story with me. And if you're willing, I want to invite you back into that space and to take us wherever you feel is relevant in that spectrum of your religious story and being with the church and you're coming away from it and all that was involved in that. And then I would call it your journey back to God, but I don't know what you would call it. And I'd love to hear you share that with us.
Yeah, totally. I don't have a title for it. And if I did, it would probably change from, season to season or even moment to moment. In the context, actually thinking about, I think when we were having that conversation, it started, it did start talking about, or we were talking about the sort of connection to the divine.
Yeah.
And at the point at which that had been disconnected for me and how it kind of came back into being.
Right. Because I think I was sharing that, like, I've had a hard year connecting to the divine. And I think I shared with you, I've had some moments where I was really angry at God.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't believe in you anymore. This has all been so hard. And that's where you looked at me in a certain way. You were like, yeah, I've been there. I understand. And it was the look in your eyes that had me leaning in like, oh, she really gets it. She's about to drop some wisdom on me right now.
Well, for me, that moment was many, many years ago. It was almost 14 years ago now that and the backstory goes even further back beyond that, of course. I'd been in a process of kind of reorienting my very, very fundamentalist upbringing and had still considered myself to be within the realm of evangelicalism. My husband and I were, worship leaders in a local church.
Didn't you say you grew up with like people speaking in tongues?
Oh yeah, I grew up in just...
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up in a very, Pentecostal was the denomination of the church that my parents went to. Very, just lots of beautiful in many ways, and also very controlling and patriarchal, and just the total mixed bag. But yeah, I grew up around people speaking in tongues. I mean, it was like there was like, when did you ask Jesus into your heart, and when did you start speaking in tongues? Like those were sort of the milestones of my childhood. And, and then you're always just like, am I really speaking in tongues, or am I just like faking it?
So like this was like regular in your household. Like would people just come up to each other and start speaking in tongues?
I mean, that would happen more at church. My dad spoke in tongues all the time during like family prayer or around the house. I learned to do that as well, but it happened more like in,
does this still happen for you? Is this something that you can open yourself to, or?
I don't, not in the same way. I definitely have other ways that I would say is like sort of the same energy or like expression happen, but it doesn't sound the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the context of that particular culture and denomination, the idea of speaking in tongues is like, how is that understood within that culture?
Yeah. So speaking in tongues would mean that you had sort of both matured and opened yourself up spiritually to a point that you really had like contact and communication with the Holy Spirit, which is considered to be part of God. God is like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And that is a, that transcends all the different denominations of evangelicalism, but within the charismatic or Pentecostal denomination, that connection with the Holy Spirit would result in these gifts of Pentecost, which are described in the Bible as, prophesying, healing the sick, speaking in tongues, all of these very demonstrative, visible kinds of things, right? It's less of you're certainly encouraged to also have an inward, private relationship with God, but the fruit should really be visible kind of thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah,
to
it's
me.
pretty fascinating.
So is this like the kind of like walking up to people and putting your hand on their forehead and like,
yeah,
be healed?
The power of Christ compels you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, totally. And then I went to college at a place that was like even more out there. Like, it was a ministry
You were
training.
really dipped into this.
Oh, I was so dipped in. I was like, fully saturated.
Okay.
So, the kinds of things like, I went to college, but let's
and
clarify.
now you're having sex rituals in your
it's
in your circle
it's
room.
Of a type. It's of a type. Let me clarify what I mean by college when I say college, because it was a ministry training school, a 3-year program where basically we learned to be like pastors or evangelists or, like.
Wow, you went there.
Yeah, I went there. That's where I went.
Wow.
And so like a standard day was like all the crazy stuff we got up to at school. But then like, you were supposed to like go to the mall or go to the coffee shop and like cast demons out of people or, I'm not kidding. Like it was just
So you're just at Starbucks.
You're just at Starbucks and you're supposed to like, and don't get me wrong.
I'm not making fun of it.
Yeah, I know.
Super fascinated in this.
I don't think you're making fun of it, and it would be okay if you did. But there was just this like, I experienced it both as very natural and also contrived.
Like, did it feel invasive
both
to you to do that with other people?
So when I say it was both natural and contrived, I mean that there were times where it felt truly intuitively or like spiritually inspired. And there were moments that were like, I can still look at and be like, that was the real thing.
Yes.
And then there were other moments where it was like, you just knew you were supposed to be doing a thing and you were pushing yourself. Like I walked up to this woman at like a Taco Bell or something one time, this older Hutterite woman. Hutterite is like a kind of Mennonite in Canada. So they, they wear these shawls and these like floor-length robes and very, don't make eye contact with any woman or with anyone. And I just had this deep, deep knowing that I needed to walk up to this Hutterite woman and tell her that she was beautiful and that God loved her. And I'm going to like cry just talking about it because I was like, no, I should not do that. Like she would be mortified. Like they're not even supposed to think that they're beautiful. They're supposed to like have place no value on their physical appearance. So like to do that would be so inappropriate. And I just like knew I had to. And so I walked up to her and I said that to her and she just like began weeping, like just weeping. And so like things like that, it's like, I know that was divinely inspired and that was like real. You know?
We all have those moments. Yeah. We all have those moments, whatever label you want to put on it.
Totally.
Okay. So when did you, can you tell me a time that you felt that it was contrived where you felt like you were forcing this a little bit because you were told to do it?
Yeah. So
and the energy wasn't right.
Yeah. There was this this girl that I was like basically mentored and, I was like supposed to get together with her however often. I don't remember exactly how often it was. She lived on the streets, in the time that I knew her, probably like overdosed 3 or 4 times, was like pregnant and miscarried or had an abortion several times. Like very
was this like
hard times.
Like a big brother, big sister sort of situation?
No, it was just like a personal, like I met her on the street one day when we were out evangelizing and she was like the person that I felt I was supposed to like take under my wing.
Okay.
But then it became this thing where like the system or the school had all these requirements of me because it was like an assignment essentially. And so what initially started as this connection became this thing that felt really, really forced. And then there were also times where she was like in a place in her life where I knew I didn't have I knew I couldn't support her. I knew I didn't like know how to help someone that was like overdosing on heroin. Like she should be getting help from not me, from somebody else that like knows how to, and of course there were other things like, that we helped connect her with. But, there were just times where I felt so in over my head and like I was being forced to to be in this relationship that sometimes actually felt unsafe. There were a couple of times I met her. We always met in a public place. But there were a couple of times we were in a public place where like other people approached us that she knew, and it was like an unsafe situation, and I didn't feel like I had the ability to be like, I'm not going to meet with that person anymore,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like she could sense the energy from you of the assignment piece? Like, I'm here because...
It's possible. I feel like there were a lot of really beautiful things about our relationship and connection. And I think that she knew I really cared about her, and I really did care about her.
Yeah.
I think that she also knew that I was in over my head.
Yeah.
And I think she probably, like many people in her situation, were just waiting for the moment to come where like I bailed,
Yeah.
And I think that would be a common feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I'm asking is because like I've definitely had moments in my life where I said a thing and the moment it left my mouth, I felt the contraction inside my body. Like, oh gosh, that was not the thing.
Yeah.
That was performative. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Why did you say that? That feels viscerally wrong. And so that's the energetics that I'm looking at, I'm scanning at with all of these things. Like, I don't care what people are or what they want to be or how they want to label themselves. What I want is for people to maintain free will. And the moments wherein I get that sinking feeling in my gut is when I feel like I've tried to manipulate or influence somebody else's free will, and I can feel it. I'm like, ooh, I was steering a little bit hard there.
Yeah.
And that's where some of my resistances in some of my experiences with organized religions lie, just even like in Central Park in New York, walking along, and I'm all for having a conversation, but the moment someone starts guilting and shaming me, that's not okay with me. And I'll walk away. I'll remain curious about anything. I'm open, but I'm not going to be influenced by anything other than the light in my heart that is alive, that is connected to that thing that is greater than me.
Yeah. Well, I would have been that person in Central Park that would have approached you. I think that I always had a pretty good connection to like being heart-centered. Like, I don't think I was ever like a Christian bully or anything, but I definitely look back and cringe at some of the things, like, I mean, it was like, the performative piece is like huge, right? It's like, oh, how many people have you gotten saved this month? How many, like, how many demons have you cast out? Like, how many friends have you called out?
How many demons have you cast out this month? Wow. That's a really unique marker.
I know. Yeah.
But like I told you, I worked at a Baptist summer camp when I was growing up. I rejected so my parents grew up Catholic. They rejected Catholicism, kind of went into more Eastern religions, and also a religion called Eckankar, or it's a spiritual group. Some call it a cult. People
you can call anything a cult.
Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely grew up in a cult.
And so I was exposed to a lot, and they had very open minds. My parents were like, whatever you want to believe, follow your heart. And hilariously and ironically to them, I then rejected their openness.
Yeah.
And I was a singular person in my family, and I became Baptist when I was 15 and started working at a Baptist summer camp. And it was the counselors competing with each other of how many children they had brought to Christ that week. And that was the metric of your performance and your service to God.
Which, I obviously share your feeling about that. And I also, I feel this sometimes, like with my mom, for example, who's definitely still an evangelical Christian, and, often expresses concern about my life and, even my kids or other siblings that I have. And I remind myself that if I believed what she believes, which is that I will go to hell and suffer eternally, then of course, like, she's actually motivated by love,
Right.
And I'm not saying that all those camp counselors
No,
were
it's true.
motivated by love, but like, I think that if you really do believe that that is true, you better fucking be like keeping a scorecard. Like, you better be getting as many people in the door as you can,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so it gives me so much grace, not, just I still have so many people like that in my life, and I really get it. And I think it's really unfortunate that the message of Christ has been so distorted. But I also I really do get it,
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for bringing that piece in.
Yeah.
So going back to your childhood, speaking in tongues, growing up in that world, this is the big beginning of your spiritual journey.
Yeah, this is the foundation of my spiritual journey. And then I met my partner. We met out in Europe. And he was always much more of a mystic. He actually didn't grow up religious. He became a Christian in high school, but just he was just a lot more mystical, and open to different paths and ideas. I was actually really threatened, even though I loved him and was so compelled by him. I was kind of threatened by his spiritual openness because it just seemed dangerous,
Right.
I mean, we were really taught growing up that there's one way, and even the Catholics and the Baptists were the Catholics were for sure out. The Baptists would probably be in, but they're going to get some, I don't know, some shanty town in heaven.
Wow.
I mean, it was
it's that
yeah, for sure.
Divided.
For sure. And I'm not saying all Christians are like that. Anybody that's listening to this, I know so many Christians that are not like that.
Right.
That is not their perspective at all, whether that's their personal place or, the personal space that they're in. And certainly even denominationally, there are so many different, organizations within Christianity that are a lot more progressive and open-minded. But it always felt dangerous to me. And then of course we got married, and we influenced each other in lots of ways. And I influenced him to, be a little more spirit led and spirit connected. And he influenced me to be a little bit more don't take everything so seriously. And maybe it's not like capital T true, And so over the course of several years, I just kind of I just deconstructed a lot of that. And with the help of, we were in Portland. We were friends with Donald Miller, who wrote the book Blue Like Jazz, which was kind of instrumental for a lot of evangelicals during that time to kind of just let go of some of the rigidity of the belief system, and other authors like him. And it just kind of came to a head for me one day where I was like, this just doesn't fit anymore. And it doesn't make sense. And I don't believe it. And for me, that needed to look like I'm out. I didn't feel like I could just be like, let's blur the edges. I was like, I just have to be out. And we were actually at a point where we were involved in leadership at this church, leading worship, doing all these things, about to step into a greater leadership role we'd been asked to by the staff. And we were thinking about it and praying about it. And then we when we gave them our decision was no. And also
actually we're leaving the church altogether.
And they were really gracious about it.
Wow.
Yeah. At that point we were part of a pretty progressive community. And our pastor was we're here for you, and we understand, and of course we want you to stay, and you can always come back, and if you need to process with us. I mean, they were really, really great about it. There were other people in the community that certainly were hurt or felt abandoned, or especially because of the role that we had. And then I felt like what happened to me as a result of that, even though I don't regret that decision, and it it came from a place of of heart, serious and heartfelt exploration, it also led me to really harden my heart in ways that I just think I was softer before, or at least I was more practiced in being receptive to something outside of myself, So I found that I just kind of started getting harder. And I wouldn't have said that at the time. It's more in retrospect that I can see that. A couple years later, my first son was born, and that was like the ultimate just rug pull on my identity, my psyche, my everything. Just like I thought, I'm the oldest of 10 kids. I thought I was really ready for motherhood, and I was not fucking ready. It just pushed me underwater, and it felt like it took years before I came up. And what resulted from that, amongst other things, but was like just a really, really challenging relationship with my son that never felt. There didn't feel like there was a lot of hope in it. I felt really resigned to motherhood, feeling like a sort of traumatic and sacrificial, like unseen place.
Did you have postpartum depression? Did you
I
have
had
difficulty?
postpartum anxiety. Really,
did you have
severely.
difficulty like attaching and connecting
Yeah,
to your son? And
absolutely.
I've heard other women talk about this and the amount of like shame that they
So
feel.
much shame. So much shame. I, of course, in the subsequent years, became so immersed in the community of women talking about these things publicly, but I wasn't part of that. And I was also among the first of my friend group to have kids. So I didn't even have like peers that were, 2 or 3 years ahead of me to give me a little bit of a heads up. I had my mom and the way she mothered. And that was sort of not like I was trying to model myself after her. I wasn't, but it's still the like, the rubric you're working with. And it was really clear to me early on that like, I don't feel like it seems like my mother felt about having children. So like, what's wrong with me?
Right. So you're experiencing this and you're kind of resolved that your relationship with your son is just going to be one of like
effort
and distance.
Yep.
Okay. And from there?
So we kind of struggled with the decision of whether we were going to have more. My husband had a similar postpartum experience, obviously different, physiologically. But, he also just had a really hard time and had a hard time connecting with our son. He had like his first year, he kind of went the like, I'm going to party and get a motorcycle and not be around that much. He didn't end up getting a motorcycle, but it was like sort of the meme. Which ended up creating like conflict and pain between us because I felt like he wasn't there for me, which exacerbated my postpartum anxiety, all of the things. We did eventually decide we didn't want to have an only child and decided to try again. So we got pregnant about 3 years and change after our first son was born. Our second son was due like exactly 4 years after. So they would be exactly 4 years apart. I was in a very, in many ways, in a different place. Like when I was pregnant with my first son, I was like very highly aware of the medical system and its just the ways that it influences and controls women. And I grew up really outside of that system, so I just never felt like I belonged in it. But by the time my second son was born, or when I was pregnant with him, I was really like, no, we're full out. Like, so I was planning a birth at a birth center. I had just a really low key midwife, like didn't really have any tests or anything during. That's not true. I still had like an ultrasound and a pretty low key pregnancy. Healthy. Everything was great. And my relationship with my oldest son was actually at its worst during my pregnancy. And I think that was probably like partly developmental on his part. He knows that things are shifting, and that's often a challenging time for he was, 3.5 at the time. I think there was some level of increasing anxiety in me as I approached that time again, even though I was really doing a lot to try to work with that anxiety. I just didn't really have very good tools back then, to be honest. Like I knew enough to know that I was anxious and that I didn't want to be, but that was like kind of the extent of what I was working with, So he and I were just like, it was bad between us. And at the same time, I'm having this like really beautiful connected experience with my baby and feeling the contradiction of that, like so much guilt. The feeling of like, oh, I'm going to bring this new child into the world and it's going to be so beautiful and amazing. And we're so connected in a way that I wasn't the last time I was pregnant. And I'm at constant odds with my, 3.5-year-old. Just the shame and guilt of that was like, that alone was probably 90% of it. And so this is like, the reason the story leads to this point, which will be obvious, but it's because this was really the moment where my spiritual journey kind of reactivated. And of course it was present the entire time. I wasn't really aware of it. So I'm pregnant. I'm 41 and a half weeks, which 42 weeks is kind of the marker at which, it's most care providers will recommend induction to prevent the baby from coming any later than that, just because there are increasing risk factors after that window. My midwife was like really chill about it, but recommending that we definitely try to get things going so that I didn't end up with a hospital induction, because I wanted to birth outside of the hospital. So I went to my midwife appointment one morning. It was 41 weeks and 5 days. So 2 days to that sort of cut, quote unquote cutoff. And everything was good. Heartbeat was perfect. My midwife swept my membranes, which is a means of helping induce labor, where they take 2 fingers and they put them up through the cervix and do like a sweep all around sort of the rim where the amniotic sac is like resting. And so it kind of just like, it helps produce like the hormones that will get labor going. And it also just like, agitates the system. So that worked. I like went into labor right away. And that was like, 9:00 that morning. By noon, I was like, fully in it. I labored at home for that whole afternoon and evening. Things seemed like they were progressing pretty quickly. I definitely felt like things were progressing a lot more quickly than they had with my first labor, which was really long and slow to progress. So around midnight that night, we were like, okay, I was like, my marker is always like, when I cannot imagine being in the car, it's time to go. Like, it's horrible to be in a car when you're in labor, just trying to like stay seated. It's like impossible. So we go to the birth center, which is nearby, and go upstairs. Midwife pulls out the Doppler to check the heartbeat. And she's, kind of moving it around, not hearing anything. I'm in labor, so I don't fucking care. Like, I'm not even paying attention to what she's doing. I'm like, please get away from me. And she's like, oh, that's, I can't find the heartbeat. Will you come lay on the bed? Cause I was bending over the back of a chair. She was like, well, just come lay on the bed. We just got to get you into a different position. So I go lay on the bed. She checks again. She still can't find the heartbeat. She's like, this is just so strange. So she does a vaginal exam where she again puts her fingers up through my cervix and does like scalp stimulation on the baby, because sometimes they just need a little like, just to get them to move, or, like in some ways so that we can get the heartbeat. Because sometimes it's a positioning thing. And so it was like right after she did that, she checked again, still couldn't find a heartbeat. And then it was like everything just, it was like chill until that moment. And then it just all switched. And she's like, we're leaving now, get the car. The hospital was right around the corner. I'm still just like, I'm just in lizard brain. Like, they're like trying to get me back down the stairs and I'm like, fuck off, like stop touching my elbow, like I do not grasp what is happening. And to the extent that, because on some level, of course, I'm aware of the details as they're unfolding, but I'm still just, the only part of me that's tracking is making the assumption that like, oh, there's just something wrong with the equipment here. And even the midwife, of course, she's like, she knows that this is serious, but she's also like, maybe it's the equipment. Like, let's, we have to go to the hospital to make sure, So we rip around the corner to the hospital. It's like 2 minutes away. We go in and it's just this comedy of errors. Like their ultrasound machine doesn't work. Like one of the nurses like doesn't want to go to the other floor to get the other one. The whole thing takes several minutes and they're just like bumbling around. They finally get an ultrasound machine and, and I'm laying on this bed in just like a hallway basically. And the doctor, the moment, and I wasn't looking, Chase was looking and he says that he knew the moment. He's like, I've seen enough ultrasounds to know, like, I know what she's about to say to us. And so the doctor just said, I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat. And, I think this is the part of the story that I shared with you was that like in my mind, I saw myself like on the edge of this cliff and I just I knew I could go over that edge and like not come back. And I didn't know exactly what that meant. Like, does that mean I go crazy? Does that mean I kill myself? I didn't know exactly the detail. It's just, I know I could go over this edge and never come back. And I wanted to, like, I just wanted to just like fucking plummet over that edge. And I don't even, this is the funny thing. Like, I don't even remember this, but my mom, who was also there, and Chase both say that I let out this like blood curdling, like just room shaking, like shriek of just like agony,
despair.
Yeah. Just absolute despair. And it just like rattled, like rattled through the space. Wow. And my labor had stopped. That was the other thing that was really, kind of crazy about the moment was like, I wasn't even having contractions anymore. And I'd been having, like active labor pattern, that whole time up until then, it didn't like slow down or die out. It like stopped.
Wow.
And so I'm laying here on this bed and that's the moment in my mind where I saw myself standing on the edge of that cliff and there's all this stuff happening around. And I don't know what the passage of that time was. That could have been 3 minutes. It could have been 45 minutes. I do not know. I'll never know. But they're all talking and they're talking about what needs to happen. And, Chase is like, he's talking about like a cesarean and they're saying, we'd rather not do a cesarean, of course that's your choice, but, it would be better if you labored naturally and didn't also have to heal from, from surgery. But then they're also saying like, it takes a long time, and because my labor had stopped, we'll probably have to induce you. And it just takes a long time with a stillborn baby because you don't have the physiological relationship, the chemical, like cascade that's happening between mother and baby that facilitates so much of the progress of labor. And when you don't have that, you're just working with the, gravity essentially, and the strength of the uterus to contract and push the baby down. So they're just like preparing me and I'm just like halfway hearing all of this, know,
cause you'd been in labor for like a day.
Yeah. I'd been in labor for 12, 14 hours, something like that. And so here is the other thing is that in my first labor, it had taken me over 48 hours to get from 3 centimeters to complete. So, for anybody listening, I mean, I assume many of your listeners will know, but maybe some won't, 10 centimeters is fully dilated. And that's the point at which a woman can begin pushing. And, the cervix is open enough for the baby to come out. So it had taken me over 48 hours to get from 3 centimeters to 10, which is a long time. And it was very, it was all of the terrible things. So when I got to the hospital, or when I went to the birth center with my second, I felt like I was so much further along than that because my labor had just been progressing so much more quickly. It felt like it was like really happening in a way that it hadn't happened with my first. I was expecting them to tell me I was a 7 or 8, almost, about to transition. And they told me I was 3 centimeters. And it just like the shutdown in my system was just like, oh, this is never going to happen. And they're saying it's going to take forever. Cut this fucking baby out of me. Like that was literally like, I'm not doing this work. I am not doing this work. And all of that's happening as I'm staring over the edge of this cliff in my mind. And I'm just like, fucking bail. Like I am out. There's no way I'm showing up for this. And this is why this is the story of my spiritual journey, because there was something that wasn't me that like pulled me back from that edge. And I cannot explain it. It's like when people talk about like, their conversion moment, which I didn't have as a child. I didn't like ever feel like I had this moment where like, Jesus revealed himself to me and suddenly I knew he was, the savior of the galaxy. That never happened for me. I believed out of fear, to be honest, as a child. But this moment was grace. It wasn't fear. It was just like pure love and pure grace. And it pulled me back from the edge of that cliff. And I stood up off that table and like the blood just fucking poured out of my body. And I immediately went back into labor. And my son was born 5 hours later. And it was the most healing experience of my life, while also traumatic and, horrifying and all of those things. That's the both end. That's the capacity we were talking about earlier. It's like there was both this unbelievable grace and healing and transformation, and it was like the most awful experience of my life. And both were completely true. And I'll never forget the redemption of, my first birth was 56 hours long, and it just left me at this feeling that like my body's broken. I can't do this. I mean, I did, but it was like not really up for the job, And the way Rowan was born, my second son, was just like, it just happened. And it was like, it was so healing. And so it just like restored. It's so fucking weird to say, because how can you say that when your baby doesn't survive? Like, how can you say that your body did what it was supposed to do? That's the paradox of it. That's the like, that was the divine, like that's why I am what I am today, because I lived and still live that paradox, that something that awful could be that designed, and this is like, I'll share this in relation to that because, my son Rowan has been with me ever since I felt him this entire time.
Like his spirit.
Yeah, in a really profound way, like not in an abstract way. I mean, there is an abstract quality to it, but I also experience him really tangibly, in moments that he communicates with me, or that I like really feel his presence, or things other people have said to me. My daughter experiences him really, really profoundly and sort of tangibly.
How old would he be today?
He would be almost 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my father, who passed away when I was 6 years old, he actually killed himself. I didn't have much of a relationship with him, so I never really had like a sense of him. In fact, I've never over all of these years ever felt his presence. And about 8 or 9 months ago, he came to me for the first time, my father, in 35 years. And the feeling in my body, I'll never forget this. The feeling in my body was so startling because it was familiar, and I didn't know that it could or would be familiar because I had never felt him all these years.
Right.
So to feel his presence and be like, oh my God, that's my father. Like it was like startling,
Wow.
like to the point of almost alarm. And also like confusion, like, why are you here now? Like what the, where have you been kind of thing.
Right.
And he just sat with me for several days before he communicated in any way. And what eventually came through was he said to me, this is like, it's almost like comical. He said, it was designed this way. Cause I had so many questions as a kid growing up, like, why isn't my dad around? Like, why did he kill himself? Why all the things and I never blamed myself. I wasn't in that boat of like, it's my fault at all. But there's still just that, like, why did this happen? And to some extent, why me? Like, a little bit of that victim feeling. I never really felt that with Rowan. That, so, again, because of just the catalytic element of everything that was going on. Like, I can honestly say I've never thought, why me with Rowan, which is insane. But I did feel that with my dad. And so he just, when he finally says something to me, he says, it was designed this way. He said, I went ahead of you. Rowan came after you. We're your guide sandwich.
I love that.
Yeah, we're your guide sandwich, he says. And I just I feel that so deeply. And I felt that from the beginning with Rowan. It was designed this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't say that in like everything happens for a reason. Like,
I know you don't.
So
yeah,
like it's,
I mean, for you to sit here and tell me that your son was born still and you never went into victim mentality with it tells me that you touched something in that moment that is beyond. That is the only explanation for how a person can resource in the middle of something so deeply confusing, shattering, and anguishing as that experience.
Yeah.
You were given a gift.
It was a gift. And that was what just so gently, but also so violently brought me back onto the spiritual path, because I could not deny that there was more than just my own story and my own like bullshit, you know? And I'm not saying all that it wasn't hard. Just let me be really clear. Like, that was a very dark time, and the months that followed were very dark. So I do not want to sugarcoat this or make anyone think that like it was just like love and healing and
good. Yes. Good.
It was so dark. And the body is like, when we talk about trauma, there's a number of different ways that we can define that. But, on a physiological level, one of the easiest ways to think about trauma is like any loop that's unfinished, right? And so when a woman goes into birth and there's something incomplete about that process, even if that she has a cesarean section, and is like, and things are great, and she doesn't understand why there's things in the body that are showing up, because she's like, I have a healthy baby and I chose that and it's fine and it's good. Like, why do I feel this way? It's because there is something incomplete in the body, a physiological process that did not, close that loop. And the same thing happens with stillbirth. What the body does when you give birth to a baby is you feed that baby and you nourish that baby and you grow that baby. And like, if you don't get to do that, the body's like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I'm making milk for who? For what? And that was one of the hardest things, was like dealing with the milk. Like just feeling the, it was so beautiful and so betraying at the same time. Like, just like, you just are, it's just in your face, like this is not going away. This is not like, and I think it's a beautiful thing in that sense too, because it would be so easy to just want to stuff all of that and just like forget about it. But your body won't let you forget. Your body cannot forget something like that. It is just, and so I chose to like go all the way into the darkness. And that's where I learned to do that. And I still fucking resist going into the darkness. So it's not like learning it gives you some kind of edge or advantage. Right. But it does mean that like you've done it And at some point when it comes up again, you'll resist, but you'll surrender because you have done it before and you do know.
The body remembers.
Yeah, the body remembers, like, we will be safe. We will be okay.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for sharing from such a deep, vulnerable place. I know this story is going to be shared and resonate with so many people, men and women. I know it's going to touch something in their hearts. So thank you so much for being so brave and courageous to share this with us.
Yeah. Thank you for giving and creating the space to do it.
You also shared with me that when this connection to that divine grace opened up and your spiritual life was lit on fire again, perhaps a candle in the darkness of what was going on, that things began to change between you and your eldest son.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of, I was going to mention that because it was truly one of the biggest gifts, for my life as it plays out in the day to day. And, going into like the darkness in the way that we all did during that time, it wasn't just me, but, I had a different layer of it for sure to go to, just mind, body, heart, all of it. But, we got to draw closer to each other in a way that I think only crisis and only like tremendous horror and pain can really take people to certain layers of connection, and both internally and externally.
Yeah.
And so we fucking like hunkered down as a family in a way that was just so profound. And people came around us in a way that was so profound. And we, this also probably sounds cliche, but like the feeling of gratitude for what you have, it's like, it just changes your perspective on everything,
Yeah.
But on in the truest sense, it was really just like the spiritual work that I began doing of looking at my own self that allowed me to shift my relationship with my son. It allowed me to because so much of it was about control. So much of where the challenge in my relationship with my son was in my desire to control him.
For him to be a different way.
Yeah, and not even necessarily that, although certainly in some moments, yes, but like just the desire to be in control. So like just really controlling about everything, about food, about sleep, about, habits, about everything. I mean, there's probably nothing I wasn't really controlling about. I still struggle with that. That's still something that's like a thing for me, right?
Yeah.
But it was so pronounced in the beginning, and it was so detrimental to our relationship. And I was just able, there's nothing more. You can't lose control more than letting go of the child that you expected
grew inside you for 9 months
and expected to take home.
Right.
That is the ultimate surrender.
Wow.
And so it just over time gave me, I was just resourced in a different way to begin doing that work in other areas of my life. And to be able to do that with my son is what, and I just I went so deep down that hole. Like he actually regressed a lot in the months after Rowan's birth, which is developmentally pretty normal as well. But like he really kind of went back into like baby, like he wanted me to dress him. He wanted me to feed him. He was like not very independent, and he had been totally independent. So it wasn't like a kid that was struggling with independence. It was like he's independent, too independent as far as I'm concerned. Like, we're battling about lots of stuff, and suddenly he just needs me for everything. And I resisted that so much at first. And then I just I actually had this, it's probably one of the only times I've ever heard an audible voice. I really don't I sense things, I feel things, I don't hear things. And I literally heard, let him be a baby. And I just felt this, when you have a newborn, you do not, even question their needs. You don't go, why do you still need that? Or like,
Right.
what on earth, like, what's wrong with you that you want me right now? Like, even if they're waking up, I mean, you might be frustrated, but you're not like,
resentful.
yeah, like, your baby wakes up in the night and it doesn't feel good to have to wake up, but you don't like, you understand, And so I just let it all go. He wanted me to sleep with him and I was so resistant to that. I dressed him, I bathed him, I fed him, I slept with him.
Wow. So you let him become the baby again and gave him the nurturing that he was needing.
Yeah. And we just like reattached and I would say we attached.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was like a few weeks of that where it was like, I just fully surrendered to like whatever he needs, I will give it to him without question. I will not think that, you already, I was so worried that like, okay,
You're
well,
too old for that.
you're too old
I'm
for
coddling
this.
him.
I'm coddling him. If I do this now, he'll never grow out of it. If I sleep with him again, or if I dress him in the morning, he'll never regain that independence. And it was the opposite of that. He just needed me for a few weeks to just be like fully there.
Wow.
And then it was almost overnight. He was like, I'm good. I'm good, Mom.
He got his tank filled.
Yeah.
And then he flipped into his natural, healthy independence.
Yep, totally.
Wow.
And that was another moment of divine grace because I didn't like have that intuition myself. In fact, my instincts told me like, no, I have to hold the line here. That's what my instincts told me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then to close the loop on this journey that propelled you into working with women.
Yeah. So I became a doula fairly shortly after Rowan was born. That was kind of step one on that journey. I was just I'd always been interested in birth. It was always something that I knew quite a bit about, both because of my upbringing and then just the way I educated myself. So it felt like a really natural progression. And then once I was a doula, a lot of the people that, were drawn to me were women that had also experienced loss.
Yeah. Was it like stillborn or miscarriage?
Stillbirth or miscarriage. And then I started having a lot of people drawn to me that weren't pregnant again, but wanted to become pregnant and were just so anxious about the process and so worried about what it would be like to be pregnant again after having experienced loss.
Right.
So then I started working with women in what I probably would, call and did call at the time like a coaching relationship. And then I ended up creating group programs because that seemed to be really a really helpful way for women to both get support from me, but also like feel the community support that they maybe weren't getting otherwise. Yeah.
It's so powerful that you stepped into and were initiated into that work.
Initiated is a good word.
Yeah. You were initiated. It was given to you divinely. It was like, oh, this is what you're doing now because you understand. And I really think that's how our work often chooses us. It's like we go through these harrowing initiatory experiences and then our empathy and compassion deepens in profound ways that through our love we can shatter paradigms and we can change things in a very tangible, grounded way in the world. And I think that's what you're doing. My mom had 4 miscarriages and I remember none of them were full term, but I think one of them was like 3-4 months. And like us burying that baby with a little seedling tree in our yard. And I was thinking about resources, like when, if this is okay to talk about, if it's not too sensitive, and please let me know.
Nothing is too
if
sensitive.
This is like, a crass question, but when your baby comes out and its heart isn't beating, like, what happens? Do you hold it? Do people talk about it? Is there a process for grieving it? Do they give you resources?
It's so crazy and it varies so widely. That's the thing. So there are many hospitals that actually have actual programs for helping families that experience stillbirth. So they'll actually have nurses that are, I don't know exactly what, training they do or don't have, but like it's kind of their job to come alongside the families that has happened to. They're, help them think about, okay, not just like, what are we going to do with the body? Like, are we going to bury or cremate? Those are obviously decisions that have to be made, but what are we going to do in the meantime? Are we going to hold the baby? Do we want to take pictures? Do we want to have other people come and see the baby? And then there would be other environments that you would give birth in where there would be zero of that, right? Where there would be no education, no training.
They would sweep away the body. And
yeah. And then that is definitely less common than it used to be, for sure.
Right.
There's just a lot more education in general around like, practices that are the most supportive. There are many like national and international organizations that are dedicated to education and support and resourcing around stillbirth.
Do you know any of those offhand?
Yeah, I can send you some links to some that we can put in the show notes. There's some great ones, but here's the thing. They all exist on a level that I think a lot of people don't end up accessing, right? And a number of them have, there's plenty of online resources, but a lot of these organizations also have local chapters where there's actual people you can call and get physical support from. I also find that people don't tend to use that. Right. You get the pamphlet at the hospital from the nurse, but like, do you ever call the numbers in that thing? Most people do not, right? No. So, and I don't know exactly what the ground, the roots level or the ground roots. What's the word? Grassroots. I don't know exactly what, the grassroots solution to this is, other than to like be in community, right? Where like you don't necessarily have someone that maybe has a ton of experience supporting someone with stillbirth, but you have people in your life that know how to show up and know how to like be in hard things. Yeah. I personally, obviously.
Yeah. What did you choose in that moment?
So we, when he came out, of course they put him on my chest immediately and we had communicated that ahead of time that we wanted that.
Yeah.
And we stayed, he was born around 6 a.m. and we stayed at the hospital until like early mid that afternoon. And we just held him the whole time and,
the tenderness of that.
Yeah. And like cleaned his body and, all took turns holding him. I mean, I mostly held him. But I, my mom and my partner and my midwife all held him for different moments. And then I would want him back. We did dress him at some point. I don't like have strong feelings about that either way. I kind of wish we hadn't, but it's not like I'm like upset that we did. Ultimately, I do wish that we didn't have anyone else come to like, to see him. And there were some very good friends that lived in the area that could have come, and my husband's parents could have come. I don't know if they would have been up for it. Now looking back, I wish that we had
included them.
A couple of other people come.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure if I would have had the capacity for that in the moment. So I don't it's not a regret. It's not like, oh, I just am so regretful that didn't happen. But one of the things that followed in the months to come, which is why I say that, was that the people that we received the most support from, that felt like the most like truly nourishing support, was the people that didn't just say like, I'm so sorry for your loss, even meaning it. You could tell that people really meant that they like felt that sorrow. But the support that really felt nourishing was when someone was just like, I just wish he was here. I just miss him.
Yeah.
Like, I just wish Rowan was here, and would like say his name, and it would feel like, of course they don't miss him the same way that we do, but it actually felt like they really did miss him. Yeah. They weren't just saying, I'm sorry for you that you're in pain. They're like, I'm in pain too.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm with you.
I'm
wish
here with
you.
He was here with us.
Yeah.
And so like, if those people had gotten to hold him, that would have felt even more potent.
Right.
And so that's why I say that. And if that like ends up resonating for anyone that hears this, and I certainly hope no one is ever in that moment to make that decision, but I think that there's something really profound to sharing him and who he is. Because
Yes.
I'm the only one, you know, and the people in that room that got to experience him in a tangible way.
This goes back to what you were saying about community. And when we allow others to witness us in our
Yeah.
pain, we
Yes.
share it.
Yeah.
And we carry it together.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had people that really did that with us. And yet you're like, what you're drawing to there is so true, because it's like in the most raw moments, like we tend to want to hide ourselves away, to be like,
Yes.
don't look at me, you know,
Yeah.
this is too
This is
painful.
ugly. This
Yeah.
is horrible. This is anguishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that we had amazing people, and the several months that followed, I mean, people just fucking knocked down our doors. They were just like, we are not leaving you alone. Like, you know, I mean, I don't think I cooked for like 5 months.
Great.
You know, I mean, it was just like a revolving door of people. You know, what ended up happening, our next door neighbors where we lived at the time, we had moved in a few months before, and we were always like, oh, we should get together. We should have a barbecue. It was like getting to the point where it was awkward because we kept talking about it, but not doing it. It's like, we're never going to get together with those people. And then we got home from the hospital. Chase did this beautiful thing where he took a note to all the, because everyone in the neighborhood knows I'm about to have a baby. I'm like walking, and, you know, so he took a note to all of the, you know,
Surrounding
immediate
neighbors.
neighbors saying, this is what happened. You know, please don't ask Mellisa, how's the baby, you know.
That was so sweet of him.
So sweet of him. And so we've been home for like maybe, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, an hour. And the wife of that couple walks over. She just barges right in the door. She doesn't knock. She doesn't wait. She doesn't do anything. She just walks right in the door and just like puts her arms around me and tells me that the same exact thing happened to them the year before. And then they just turned out to be the most beautiful gift. They just like held us, and they got it, and they knew, and we got to hold them, and we got to like just miss our babies together. And like, it was really, really special.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are the chances?
What are the chances?
Divine, I would say.
Quite divine. Yeah. The hardest part, back to like the moment in the hospital, and I will say, like, this is the part that like still lives in my body. Like, well, a lot of it still lives in my body, but this part really lives in my body. Oh, the moment came where it was like, where, like, how do we leave? You know, how do we like leave him? And so like the question was like, do we have the nurses take him, or do we leave him on the bed and walk out? And it felt like the ultimate lose-lose. I'm like, neither of these are good options.
Do I want to leave, or do I want to have this taken?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I opted to leave because I didn't want to have him taken.
Right.
But it was like choosing between, like, I don't know. It was
in the ultimate stabbing place.
Yeah. It was just the worst
Sophie's
decision.
choice.
Yeah. But, yeah, the leaving and just kept like looking back, like, this is so much finality, you know, like there's no going back to that. And at the same time, there's only no going back to that moment. And there's only no going back to that body and that representation of who he is. Right. Because it didn't actually change that, like, this journey has continued, and he has continued it with us.
Yes.
You know, so it was really just that moment that we walked away from.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, your story is so touching and so deep. And I know that there are people listening to this who have suffered immense and shocking and jarring and painful loss. And you are giving a voice to them. And you are giving a voice to their experience of being in touch with these energies, with these spirits from the other side, and letting them know this is truth. This is okay. This is beautiful. This is real. Yeah. And so I want to thank you for saying that here today and inviting everybody into that space where they can connect with the energy of love that exists beyond all form, in all planes, and is here with us all the time. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to share.
It has been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. I know we will have more
We
because
will.
we have scratched the surface today.
You just think of what I might know about NFTs in a week.
I know.
You have to have me back.
We
to talk
never
about
even
NFTs.
talked about herbology and the teas you make
It's
in
true.
your deer skin drum, but we'll save some golden nuggets.
The deer skin drum alone is worth the price of admission.
Really?
Yes.
Do you want to tell that story quickly?
No, let's save it for another time.
Save it? Okay, we'll have to have you back on.
Cool.
Back by popular demand.
Well, we'll see what the demand is.
No,
and then you can
I'm
decide.
sure. I want to ask you, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you? What's the best way to connect with you if someone's really touched by your story and wants to get
Instagram.
to know wants to get to know your work?
Not on Instagram. You can find me at my website, which is melisareeves.com. And we'll obviously have a link to that because the spelling of my name is a little unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So on my website, there's obviously information about me and working with me, as well as events that I have coming up. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you again, Mellisa.
And thank you, Hallie.
Loved having you.
Such a pleasure.